Today on the DNVR Rockies podcast, it is a special show. It's the final regular season podcast of the year, and we are talking about the big question of, is there a path forward for Kris Bryant? We've got Noah Spirek on the show joining us to talk about that and more coming up on the DNVR Rockies pod. You are tuned into the DNVR Rockies podcast, brought to you by Bet365. Using code DNVR365 when you sign up. Choose your offer and find out why it is never ordinary with Bet365. Live from the Toyota Lounge today, everyone. Last regular season pod of the year. We had to, of course, bring back our favorite guest, Noah Spirek, live from the library at University of Indiana. Is that correct, Noah?
Indiana University.
University. My bad. That's on me. Live from the library. So if there's a little whispering going on from Noah's side, we hope no librarians are getting into the screen behind you. Thank you again for joining us. It's been a crazy year, man. You've gotten to be around the Rockies for like the first 3 quarters of the season, then you had to go back to college. But another long season in the books for Rockies fans.
Yeah, well, number one, just wanted to say thank you for having me on today. I'm really excited to the last regular season pod on a Friday. It's kind of crazy that we are 159 games in, and yeah, it's been a bit of a challenging year, but I'm excited to talk about it.
Of course, as are we all. And we have an interesting topic today because it's something that we've talked a couple times about, but we had some new information that came up that gave us a reason to bring this back to the light. But it is, what is the path forward for Kris Bryant with the Rockies? And the reason this is coming back up for us on this show is because Kris actually has been at the games for the Rockies for the past few weeks, and he's been in the dugout, and a phenomenal reporter in Thomas Harding, phenomenal writer in Thomas Harding, got the chance to talk to Kris Bryant just a few days ago and put out an article where he actually had a really candid conversation with Kris and talked about, first of all, how Kris is handling this whole process, having come over to the Rockies and not had the success that he's obviously wanted, that Rockies fans have wanted, but then also this season being pretty much the 3rd year in a row that has been plagued by injuries and frustrations and lack of output. And so he talked candidly about Thomas Harding about that, and then talked about what is his path forward. Where does he fit into this lineup in the future? So we're going to kind of unpack some of the things that he said in that article. If you guys haven't seen the article already, be sure to head to my Twitter at CJJ Saez. I did retweet that, so you guys can see it. It was a great article from Thomas Harding, and I think it shines a light on some of the opportunities that Kris might have with the Rockies moving forward. But I want to get into it. So first of all, I want to start by saying my biggest takeaway from this article, before we get into the nuts and bolts of some of the quotes, is there is a very, very small window in which Kris Bryant fits into this Rockies team successfully moving forward. And I don't think that should come as much of a surprise, but I think it's worth noting that from the mouth of Kris Bryant, we are all aware now that there is a very small window that this becomes a successful relationship moving forward. And that's something to note that he is acknowledging as well. It's just, at this point, I mean, we're licking our wounds, literally, with Kris Bryant and trying to say, is there a way we can get even the slightest bit of positive output from that? So I wanted to know, first of all, your reaction initially to some of these comments that have come out from Kris Bryant. Before we get into this, Noah, what's your thoughts on this whole situation?
Yeah, well, I first want to say the Kris Bryant era of Rockies baseball, if we can call it that, has been one of the most frustrating ones in my lifetime. And I sit here at 20 years old, despite Christian maybe saying I'm 12 sometimes. But the biggest takeaway I had from the article was this direct quote. It's just a line. I'll read it real quick. Kris Bryant says, "There are many nights where I sit there crying myself to sleep. It sucks sitting here watching games, knowing I cannot contribute in any way." And that kind of surprised me because
Yeah.
the media has kind of been painted this picture by Chris's past comments and kind of the way that things blow up over social media. KB's kind of looked at as someone that hasn't really cared a whole lot about being a Rocky. And so I don't know if that comment was just him saving face, but it was encouraging for me to hear that he really is struggling internally with this. And look, he's a professional. He wants to be out there competing with his guys. And it was just, you hope for the best for him. But as you said, I don't know what the successful window is with Kris Bryant on the team.
Yeah, and there's two sides of this that I look at, and I agree with you. That was the kind of the biggest, at least reactionary quote for me out of that whole article was like, you see that there's an emotional side to this, which we all know. I mean, these guys aren't robots. These guys have emotions. They want Kris Bryant, even if maybe he doesn't have as much love for the Rockies organization as we would want him to, he still, if nothing else, cares about, making sure that he continues to play baseball at the highest level he can and go out on a positive note. No one wants to be remembered as a guy who got traded and just fell off the face of the earth and is now hated by an entire franchise, an entire state of baseball fans. That's not the way anyone wants to go out. But there's two ways I look at this. There's the emotional side of this, and then there's the business side of this. From an emotional standpoint, as I just pointed out and as you just highlighted, yeah, this sucks. And I know Kris wants to be out there performing at his best. He has built relationships with guys in that locker room, in that clubhouse. We've heard other guys talking about Kris and their relationship with him and saying positive things about this. And I've made this connection in comparison between Russell Wilson and the Broncos and Kris Bryant and the Rockies, because I do think there are a lot of similarities. A guy who came in after a huge success at his last market, came in, got a big contract in a Denver market, and then just kind of fizzled out. The constant for both of those has been with Russell Wilson, his teammates in the Broncos had nothing but good things to say about him. The Rockies, same thing. Kris Bryant's teammates defend and support him. And I think that shows a lot about, his relationship with the guys, because we're not there for all of the conversations and the things that go on behind the scenes. Even though we get some clubhouse access as the media, we don't see all the things that go on in the dugout and behind the scenes. So it does show that there is a relationship that Kris has built with some of those young guys, with some of that talent inside the clubhouse. And from a business standpoint, there also is going to be that pushback from the fans, in putting it really lightly, that pushback and that frustration from the fans when you have a $182 million 7-year contract and you have not even fully played an entire season worth of games in 3 years. You played 37 games this year. There's naturally going to be anger and frustration and resentment, even if it's not your fault directly from a Kris Bryant standpoint. So I can see both sides of it. I can see him being frustrated and emotional through this process. And I can also see the fans, and I'm right there with them, being frustrated and saying we deserve better from this. And I circle back to my comments and kind of analysis on the whole Broncos situation with Russell Wilson, where I didn't put this as much on Russell as I did on the front office of the Broncos for signing him to that huge contract before really seeing what he was capable of. I questioned the Rockies front office leadership in signing Kris Bryant when he came in. So we can kind of go circles on that. But I do think that it was positive to see Kris Bryant say that he cares. Not going to say that encapsulates everything and that lets him off the hook. But as a Rockies fan, I want to see more of that. I want to see Kris Bryant going out there and getting in front of the camera and saying, I care and I want to succeed for Rockies fans. Not for myself, but for Rockies fans. That was a step in the right direction for me.
100%. There seems to be a void between KB and Rockies fans. And I know that he was at the offseason meet and greet that the Rockies try to do. I believe it's called Rockies Fest. But still, That's not enough, because every time I tune into a game on TV now, since I'm not there, the camera never shows him. So from an at-home viewer perspective, we don't even know if he's in the dugout. And I think organizationally, this is kind of a big moment because with Charlie Blackmon retiring, the Rockies brought KB in to be a face of the franchise guy. And there are a lot of casual Rockies fans out there, and I say that with like all respect, just people that want to tune in and watch some games, but they're not going to be fully bought in. With Charlie Blackmon leaving the team, I'm not sure for a lot of those Rockies fans who's the guy that they recognize on the team. It's a
Yeah.
young team right now, and I want to say that it's McMahon because he's the all-star, and we'll talk about him later in the show. But this is a big juncture for Kris Bryant and the Rockies, and this offseason has to be a productive one. If the Rockies aren't getting better as a team, his back has to get better so that he can be out there and be a leader for, as we mention all the time, this is a young roster of guys.
Well, and that's a perfect pivot into our conversation of, where do we go from here with Kris Bryant? Where do the Rockies, what's the window in which he can be successful? And I think you outlined it perfectly. Like, there is a place for him on this team. Without Charlie Blackmon, you need some of those veteran guys who have had success, especially. Kris Bryant is one of the only players in that clubhouse that has actually been to a World Series, that has actually had success beyond just a playoff game or two in 2017 and 2018. You need to have guys like that can have a level head and help bring some of these young guys in. That's where I want to see this shifting because, yes, Kris Bryant, I think there's a way in which if his back can heal, we can get him to a place where he can have some marginal output physically in on the field. But I think it has to be also in the clubhouse. And I just haven't seen that and haven't seen his engagement with that as much as I would have wanted to. And I was talking to Thomas yesterday in the press box, and he was saying, yeah, like Kris Bryant's a guy who will talk and who will get out there, and he has been painted in a bad light, understandably so, and he wants to change that. Well, you've got to be the one to do that, and I think this is a good step. Kris Bryant talking to Thomas, Thomas is an incredible beat writer, and Thomas has done a good job of kind of painting this picture along the way. But you've got to do more stuff like that. I want to see Kris getting out there and engaging with Rockies fans, engaging with the young guys, and not just doing the mandatory Rockies Fest and the interviews on media day and that kind of stuff. Like, put yourself out there for Rockies fans. Get involved with a local nonprofit. We know you're based in Las Vegas, but you see Ryan McMahon, Kyle Freeland. These are guys that are getting involved in the local community. Ryan McMahon, He's based in Scottsdale, Arizona. His home is Scottsdale. He is not a Denver native here in Colorado permanently, and yet he's still getting involved in local nonprofits and the Colorado Children's Hospital. And, those are the types of things that I want to see from Kris Bryant. Russell Wilson did that for the Broncos when he came to Denver. Russell Wilson got the fat contract, and if there's one thing you cannot say against Russell Wilson as a Broncos fan, it was that you can't say that he didn't embrace the Denver community. Russell Wilson he bought a home here. He wanted to live here and set his roots here forever, and it just didn't work out. I want to see Kris Bryant, engaging in this Colorado community above what he's doing right now. That is part of that window that I could see him fitting into successfully if he makes some of those steps moving forward.
Yeah, I think you nailed the community aspect of it, and I want to more closely tie it to the baseball team aspect of it. I think it was you the other day that asked McMahon a question of, hey, with Charlie gone as the leader, do you feel more pressure to step up? And McMahon kind of gave the answer of, well, we've got a great group of guys. Like, everyone can step up and fill that void a little bit. Ryan Spielborg's Rockies broadcast sideline host, if you will, he posted a video the other day of Charlie Blackmon before each game as the starter gets ready to go out on the field. He says, like, let's go, and gets the guys, high fives them on the way out onto the field. This is like a door swinging wide open for Kris Bryant to step into a leadership role. And I don't think an opportunity like this comes about very often when you talk about such a predominant leader leaving and having a guy kind of ready and waiting in the wings that has been able to do it before. You hear it a lot of times with, as one captain leaves, another guy steps up in football and becomes a first-time captain. Kris Bryant has been the proverbial captain before in Chicago, and this is a perfect opportunity. You know, we talk about it. It's wide open for someone to step up, and McMahon said it himself. It'll take a lot of guys to step up. Why not Kris Bryant taking the extra step to cover some of the ground for the other players?
Yeah, well, and I go back to something Charlie Blackmon said also on leadership, and I had this in this quote in my article that I wrote on Charlie Blackmon retiring. He talked about how hard it is to establish yourself as a leader without a proven track record when you're young and you're trying to build that leadership principle. Kris Bryant doesn't have that issue. Like, he has the success. Like, he can be a leader. You just have to show up, really. I mean, and look at Charlie Blackmon. What Jack Corrigan described him as his number one leadership trait? Consistency. Kris Bryant is injured, sure. Be there for your team. Be there for your guys. Be consistent, even if you are injured. That's what I want to see most out of Kris Bryant. And we're going to continue this conversation here because I want to pull a couple more quotes from that article and talk specifically about the medical side of things, because I think there's an interesting aspect of who his surgeon is and some of the success that this surgeon has had on other MLB stars in the past. So we're going to talk about that in a moment. But before we get into that, going to take a break here real quickly. Give a shout out to one of our sponsors. We've got a new sponsor here on the show. It's Blue Chew. And Blue Chew, if you're looking for an opportunity to boost your confidence in the bedroom, you've got to check out Blue Chew. Blue Chew is an online service that delivers same active ingredients as Viagra, Cialis, Levitra, but at a fraction of the cost. And of course, in a chewable form. The process is super simple. You can sign up on BlueChew.com, consult with one of their licensed medical providers, and once you're approved, you'll receive a prescription within days. The best part is that it's all done online. We know how easy and convenient that can be. You don't have to go into a doctor's office, have some awkward conversation with a doctor. You can be able to do that all from the comfort of your couch. They say there's nothing sexier than confidence, and Blue Chew can help give you the confidence where it counts. We've got special deals for our listeners. Try Blue Chew for free when you use promo code ALLCITY at checkout. Just pay $5 shipping. That's BlueChew.com, promo code ALLCITY to receive your first month for free. Visit BlueChew.com for more details and important safety information. We thank Blue Chew for sponsoring this podcast. Also got to give a shout out to our friends over at ZBiotic. I've got to tell you, man, this ZBiotic's one of the best products that I've been using recently. It's that time of year where you start to go out with friends. It's football season. You want to go out, watch some college football on a Saturday night. But the issue with that is I want to go out drinking and having a good time. I want to be able to enjoy myself on Sunday as well and not feel kind of gross the next day. And with ZBiotics pre-alcohol, it helps you to bounce back a lot quicker on those next days. Helps the recovery time get a little bit quicker as well. So, before it was either a choice of do you want to have a great night or a great next day. With ZBiotics pre-alcohol, you can have both. They're the first genetically engineered prebiotic. They were invented by PhD scientists to help tackle the rough mornings after drinking. The product produces this enzyme in your gut to help tackle all of those toxic byproducts, so it helps you to just feel better the next day. So remember to make ZBiotics your first drink of the night. Drink responsibly, and you'll feel your best the next day. Make the most out of the rest of your fall heading into winter. Stock up on pre-alcohol now. Head over to zbiotics.com/DNVR Rockies to get 15% off your first order. They are backed with a 100% money-back guarantee, so if you are unsatisfied for any reason, they'll give you your money back, no questions asked. Remember, that's zbiotics.com/DNVR Rockies to get 15% off your first order. Thank you, ZBiotics, for sponsoring this episode and for sponsoring our good times. All right. Let's go back to this conversation about Kris Bryant, and I want to go back to some of these quotes, and we talked about some of the emotional side of things for Kris Bryant, and I want to look at now some of the logistics side of this return. So Kris talked about what he's planning on doing in this offseason. He said, quote, "I expect that of myself, I'm going to work my tail off to get there," talking about his comeback to a spot in the lineup. Who knows what this future entails for me? I know one thing, I'm going to set myself up to be in the best possible position to succeed. Now, how do you get to a spot like that for Kris Bryant? Well, that comes into the medical recovery. He's working with the training staff. He's working with a surgeon. He's trying to get back to where he wants to be able to be in this lineup. So he did talk a little bit about his medical situation, what's going on with his back. Well, he said, quote, "There's basically no disc between his vertebrae, L4 and L5. It's just bone rubbing back and forth. And he also has severe arthritis in his facet joint. I'm not a doctor there. That sounds really painful. So what's the next step for that? Well, what's happening right now for Kris Bryant is he is seeing a noted spine surgeon, a one Robert G. Watkins V, who happens to be the same spine surgeon that has worked on Clayton Kershaw when Kershaw was going through his same level 5 back injuries. Now, we know that Clayton Kershaw has made his return for the Dodgers this year. That is to be determined on whether or not he's going to have a lot of success in this postseason with that return. But what that shows me is that this spine surgeon has had a lot of experience working with guys of similar injury, and it shows me that there is a small window in which, if he can handle his recovery and rehab correctly this offseason, maybe there's a way that he can have very limited pain coming back next year, where you put him in, like I said, maybe in a designated hitter spot without Charlie Blackmon, or even a good pinch hitter position where he's coming in and late in the games to step in as a pinch hitter and be able to maybe bring some of that power back. I don't really know what that's going to look like. Back injuries are so hard to predict what the recovery is going to look like. But if there's someone who's going to be able to get him back on track, it seems like this spine surgeon has had a proven track record.
Yeah, and honestly, all I can say is the Rockies, if he's going to be your designated hitter, they need the surgery or the fix or whatever has to happen. They need it to work to where he can generate enough torque to pull the baseball out of the ballpark. I mean, honestly, whatever his average has been on the Rockies, it feels like about half of his hits have been bloop singles, and I don't have the numbers to show off, average exit velocity or anything like that. But from the naked eye perspective, it feels like there hasn't even been that many balls, one hopping the wall or skipping, that'll roll to the wall. I just haven't heard that a lot. And it's been disappointing because you look at his early years and he was a guy that was hitting 30-plus homers. Even a couple years ago, once he was off the Cubs, I felt like with the Giants he had a bit of a resurgence, but it hasn't happened yet in Colorado, in a place that is notorious for, the ball travels farther at altitude, and the Rockies just need his power stroke to come back.
Well, I'm going to ask you this because you and I have watched batting practice before. If there's one guy that comes to mind when you watch BP for the Rockies that just is lacing up the baseball, who is it? Who's the king of BP for the Rockies?
It's got to be Sam Hilliard off the top of my head.
Sam Hilliard, exactly. So, I remember watching Sam Hilliard and Kris Bryant hitting BP a few months ago, and they were going back to back. They were kind of switching off between each other. And Sam Hilliard, who is by no means Kris Bryant, like by no means is Sam Hilliard Kris Bryant. Watching Sam Hilliard hit BP and then seeing Kris Bryant go out there, it was night and day from a ball leaving the yard type of standpoint. Sam Hilliard, on even the balls that weren't leaving the yard, he is lacing backspin baseballs off, like on a liner, probably 104 plus exit velo off the wall in dead center. And Kris Bryant, like you said, it felt like almost like he was like getting up there and doing like a little golf chip swing, like he was he's getting his pitching wedge out there and he was kind of chipping it about 50 yards, downfield, down the fairway. He would get the ball out every once in a while, but it was like he was, slapping at the baseball, putting enough backspin on it where it just carried out at Coors Field. I was never like watching Kris Bryant being like, damn, he's stroking it. And then you go see Charlie Blackmon, who's 38 years old. Again, not Kris Bryant from a power standpoint, at least in his prime. And Charlie Blackmon is lasering the baseball out at Coors Field still. I mean, Charlie Blackmon is making a case that he should retire 5 years from now, not this season. And so that's where I'm like, you hit it the nail on the head. Like, is Kris Bryant going to ever be a guy who can leave the yard at a consistent clip? I don't think that's ever going to happen again for Kris Bryant. So does he have to adjust where he's at mentally, physically, his adjustments to the plate? You look at it like from a pitching standpoint, when you got a guy who could throw 100 miles an hour when he was 22 years old, and then all of a sudden he wakes up and he's 34 years old and he can no longer throw 100 miles an hour. Well, what do they always tell you? Well, you've got to adjust and find ways to work on your off speed more and lean more heavily on those off speed pitches, and you become a different pitcher. I would argue Kris Bryant's in the same boat as a hitter. You can't hit the ball 450 feet like you used to. You're not Marcell Ozuna anymore like you were when you were in your prime. So what do those adjustments look like? Do you become a guy who can just slap the ball around the field, and we just know every time you become a pinch hitter and you get up to the plate, you are going to put the ball in play no matter what? I don't want to see a single strikeout ever again from Kris Bryant. Like, are you going to be that guy? And if you're not, maybe that's it then. I mean, that's where I think there's such a small window for him to fit into this team.
I think the comparison between Bryant and Hilliard brings up an interesting conversation about swing planes because, as you said, the ability for Hilliard to generate backspin is honestly just next level, and I wish I did have the metrics up in front of me because I know that they do track, I believe it's something called barrel through the zone percentage, but basically you want to be dragging your barrel through the zone as long as possible because that gives you the highest chance of hitting a ball 95 plus miles an hour or more, and having it classified as a hard hit ball. I think naturally KB's always kind of had the launch angle swing, even when he was with the Cubs in his early years. It's kind of just been quick through the zone, almost like a hook. And I think you kind of nailed it comparing it to, a golf chip where it seems to go up and come down just as fast. I think Charlie Blackmon definitely falls somewhere in between because he's got a pretty flat swing, but Hilliard's is a long loop through the zone. Hence, the ball seems to still be going up when it's going over the center fielder's head. But I think you brought up a good point about adjusting because as you get older, things change. And you mentioned from a pitching perspective, a guy that comes up throwing fast and then later he can't do the same and he has to adjust. I think a perfect example of that is Justin Lawrence. I don't know if you remember his debut in Arizona, but he touched 100, 101, and now he pretty routinely just works 93, 94 with the fastball. And obviously this whole season he's kind of been trying to figure out how to locate his pitches in an effective manner. And so, applying that to hitting, Bryant, it's not the same as Lawrence because Bryant's injuries have kind of forced him into this situation where he just doesn't visually look to have any of the power that he used to. Yeah, you're exactly right where this offseason there's going to have to be adjustments. And shoot, we saw Brenton Doyle last year, worst qualified hitter in the sport. Now a 2020 guy, and at this point I believe he's got 29 or 30 stolen bases and he's close to 25 homers. So one offseason can change a lot. It's just about the guys that you go see, and we sure hope that this offseason's a really productive one for KB.
Yeah, and look, I would love there to be a world in which he is a asset to this team. I am not anti-Kris Bryant whatsoever. I would love for the Rockies to be successful with him. You're paying him $182 million over 7 years. I want him to be incredible, and I want the best for Kris Bryant. But again, back to a business standpoint, like from a business perspective, like there has to be an understanding that if he's not performing, I don't care how much you're paying him, he's not playing. And the Rockies have a lot of opportunity and, I don't know, hype going into next year, if that's a viable term for that. I talked to Kyle Freeland after his game yesterday, and just because it was his last, start of the season, and we won't see him again till next year. And he said something that stuck with me where he said, look, we've been trying to, we've been in a rebuild for a few years and we've been trying to kind of, every year we say like, oh, we're excited for the prospects of next year. Kyle Freeland looked me straight in the eyes and said, this feels different. These young guys, he's like everyone in the bullpen, and he's talking about pitching, but everyone in the bullpen for the Rockies feels like they want the baseball. And he's like, I haven't been able to say that for these, 22-year-olds for the last few years. Like it felt like, you've got some good prospects, but like they're kind of just like hoping they get some playing time or whatever. He's like, no, like these guys want to perform and they're playing hard. And he was like, and like their motivation and their energy is like, it's different than anything I've seen out of a Rockies, going into a Rockies offseason. He's like, I'm actually super excited for next year. And I just thought that energy was fascinating to me from Kyle Freeland, a guy who's been there when you've been a playoff team and when you've been at the worst, at your worst. So this is going to be a team that I think is competitive, maybe not playoff team, but is competitive over the next couple seasons, or getting more competitive. I think Kris Bryant there, it's going to be hard for him to earn a spot. And I do think he has to earn a spot at this point. So it's going to be interesting to see where he fits into that. And if the Rockies actually make him earn a spot, I do think they will.
I'm glad that you mentioned the prospects of the young guys that are in the bullpen right now, because I feel like this show I haven't been the most positive just talking about Kris Bryant. It's hard to spin that. Yeah. But the bullpen, man, that has been so much fun. And we were texting back and forth just a couple weeks ago about, these September Rockies. They've been far more interesting to tune into than they were for a large part of the season, because early on it felt like, crap, if we're not up by 3 runs going into the ninth, this is going to be interesting. And heck, they broke the record for the most games blowing a 5 or more run lead. So it's been a trying year for the bullpen, but that is probably start to finish of the season, the one group that I feel so much better about heading into next year.
Yeah, no, and we're going to talk plenty, after this season ends on what do we need to improve on, that kind of stuff, like what needs to be goals for next year. But for this year, I agree. Ending on a high note with your bullpen has been huge, and that's such a confidence builder going into the offseason. We have some more conversation about guys that need to move forward going into the offseason. Nolan Jones needs to make some pretty big adjustments getting ready for next year. Bud Black talked to me a little bit about that yesterday, so we're going to talk about that here in just a moment. But before we get into that, got to give a shout-out to our friends over at Bet365, because at Bet365, we don't do ordinary. And right now, using code DNVR365, when you sign up, if you deposit $10, you can choose between either a bet and get offer or a first bet safety net offer. But again, I've got to give a shout-out to our MLB early payout offer, because we've only got a few more weeks where we can actually talk about Major League Baseball betting right now. And it is a great time to be betting in the sports betting world of Major League Baseball. And so with Bet365, they've got the early payout offer. You're a winner if your team goes up by 5 runs or more, and you get an instant payout. Parlay and same-game parlay selections, of course, marked as a winner. Noah, you said, and you reminded me of something before we started, that the Rockies officially hit their over. Was it on wins you were saying? They hit the over on
60.5 win total.
So if you had bet over on the 60.5 win total, the Rockies have officially eclipsed and hit 61 wins on the season.
Successful season.
Yes, we will. From a sports betting standpoint, Rockies had a successful year. We are going to ride that till we die. Congrats to the Rockies on a successful 61 win or more season, hitting the over this season. So, yeah, you got to check out our friends over at Bet365, though. Use that code DNVR365 when you sign up and see why it's never ordinary at Bet365. You must be 21 or older and physically located in Colorado. Please gamble responsibly. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem and wants help, call or text 1-800-GAMBLER. Also, got to give a shout out to our friends over at Coors Light. You can see the Coors Light bottle tops here, right there below us in the screen. That is a bucket of Coors Light that is tempting me. It is truly the best light beer in the business, although it's a little early right now. What is it, 10:30? Yeah, a little early for me at this point. But look, we've got a good season, or a good series ahead of us here to wrap up the season for the Rockies at Coors Field. I was just at Coors Field yesterday, obviously working, but went up to the rooftop bar to visit some friends who were enjoying some nice, cold, refreshing Coors Lights. And it was funny. I look around, and I mean, it was like I should have taken a picture. It was like an advertisement for Coors Light. All of us, everyone had Coors Light. They all had Coors Light in hand, because it is truly the most refreshing and relaxing and enjoyable Coors beer or light beer on the market. And Coors Field, Coors Light, they go hand in hand. So if you're going out to the Rockies Stadium or to Coors Field this weekend to wrap up this last season series of the home season, got to check out Coors Light. Go up to that rooftop bar anytime before first pitch. $3 Coors Light beers. It is truly the best. You can also get Coors Light delivered straight to your door with Instant Cart by going to CoorsLight.com/DNVR. Please celebrate responsibly. Coors Brewing Company, based in our backyard here in Golden, Colorado. All right, we got to talk Nolan Jones. Couple guys, actually. We're going to talk Nolan Jones and RyMac because both of these guys are going through some things this season. RyMac in the second half of the year, he had a great first half of the season. Obviously, he was our lone all-star. But Nolan Jones, I want to start by talking about him because he burst onto the scene last year as one of the best rookies. I mean, he was in the conversation for Rookie of the Year. His offensive stats were incredible. Like he was one of those bright young stars that you were like, all right, he's made it. He's got a spot on this team for years to come. And he battled injuries this year, but just never has been able to recoup his success that he had and bounce back from where we saw him in his first year. So, no, before I get your take on this, I want to share a clip from yesterday. We asked Bud Black in the media scrum, which was actually held in the press room yesterday because they were doing a business of baseball thing. It was weird. We didn't get to talk in the bullpen. I thought they were like firing Bud Black when they announced that we were meeting in the press room, and I'm like, why are we meeting pregame with Bud Black in the press room? I don't know. No, it was just a business of baseball thing going on the field. But Bud was at the podium or at the table yesterday talking to us about Nolan Jones. And so, Emma, this is the clip that we had lined up for you on Bud Black's thoughts on how does Nolan Jones kind of get back into his groove in this next season.
I think with Nolan, I think it's, every not every player, but most players at times have a bumpy path, especially earlier in their career. And I think with Nolan, that's the thing that I will let him know that as a young player every year leading up to your first couple, it's a process of truly becoming an established major league player. Last year we thought that he had gotten there, but history tells you that it's not always that smooth as a rookie, and then you keep going. Right. So he has to regroup. There's no doubt about it. He has to regroup and get to that point of I think self-confidence and where he is, with his, with his swing to recapture what he had in 2023. And there's some things that the hitting coaches in Nolan have worked a lot on this year. And he was a little banged up, right? There were some health issues there, but he's got to recapture, I think, confidence and I think physically where he was in 23. And that can be accomplished. But I think it's going to be an important offseason for him and an important spring training as well.
So Bud Black with a lot to say there on Nolan Jones. But Noah, I mean, so to give the fans an understanding of where Nolan Jones has been at, again, with some injuries. He played 75 games this year. He's got a .215 batting average, only 3 home runs. That one stands out to me. 320 slugging and 623 OPS. I hate to have this conversation, but is Nolan Jones guaranteed a roster spot next year? Even though he had the season of a lifetime, his rookie year, is he guaranteed a spot in that outfield to start next year?
I think so, and boy, I really hope so, because that's my guy. And
yeah.
the first thing that I thought of, this is horrible reasoning, but the dude had a bobble night game this year, and it felt like this was his year to really, like you said, last year he announced himself to Rockies fans, and he got recognition around the league, but it felt like this year was going to be the year where he announced himself to the whole league, and everyone's like, okay, that's the Rockies 3-hole hitter. That's who we're going to pitch around. And with Brenton Doyle stepping up, you would have loved to head into next year saying, okay, our 3-4-5 is going to go McMahon, Doyle, Nolan Jones. And I think
And
Nolan Jones
Tovar.
hit five.
Yeah, and Tovar in there too.
Yeah, exactly. That's a formidable first four, and now with Charlie gone at the leadoff spot, but that would have been an elite, first half of your lineup.
Yeah.
I think now he, as much as anyone, I think you've definitely talked about this in the past. He is so hard on himself, like to the point where it's like, geez, man, like you don't have to say all that.
Yeah.
When he goes 0 for 4, he'll call himself the worst player in the world, and it's been a year that I imagine he's probably never really had to deal with. Having such a great year before, and then having the disappointment like this, and he also became a father this season. He got hurt twice. It's been a testing season in so many different ways, and I think, this whole segment right now is talking about guys who need to grow in the offseason. It's going to be a critical one if the Rockies want to take another step towards any sort of success next year.
Well, and it's going to happen. We're going to have that conversation anytime your team loses probably 100 games. You're going to have the conversation of everyone needs to get better. Even the guys who are playing well need to get better. This is an entire team of guys that need to have a really good offseason. I do think you're right that he will have the grace of at least starting out on this Rockies team if he's healthy and has a good offseason. He'll be given that roster spot for sure to start because the positive upside is, like you just said, if you have rookie Nolan Jones numbers paired with Brenton Doyle, Ezekiel Tovar, a good Ryan McMahon, that is a formidable half of your lineup. And Nolan Jones had 2 brutal errors yesterday, which actually ended up getting him taken out of the game, which is really tough to see, and it encapsulates, I think, this whole season for him. But he's also a great outfielder, too. 99% of the time, that was just a fluke. Just one of those bad games. We've all had them. But I do think there is a bit more pressure going into next year, and that's where my concern is he's either going to step up and lean into the pressure, or it's going to be overwhelming. And I hope that he gets the help that he needs to be able to kind of hit that with some more intensity because of the pressure. But I think if he starts out this next year and isn't playing up to the standards that the Rockies are expecting him to be at, I think there's a possibility that he gets sent down, or at least gets, the spot gets given to someone else. And it's so unfortunate given how great he was last year, but that's baseball. Again, it goes back to the business thing. Like you just cannot have a guy on a team that is now, you've had 2 back-to-back 100-loss seasons almost. You can't not be getting better now. Like you've hit the bottom. You need to be taking steps to move forward. So we're going to talk about that more here in just a second because I want to segue into RyMac here in just a moment. But we got to hit our last ad breaks and talk about our friends over at Westera Credit Union, because at Westera Credit Union, they're all about helping their financial members prosper. And the backbone of Westera is education. They were founded by 8 school teachers back in the day, so their DNA is just helping educate people on how to manage their finances. And the way they do that is really just by friendly and local tellers that are helping communicate with you every step of the way. This doesn't feel like some big bank that's trying to take all of your money and kind of string you along. They are truly engaging and friendly. I've had a great experience working with them, and you can just see that in every single interaction that you have with Westera Credit Union. And they've also got some really cool things and cool features that you have the options when you get involved with Westera Credit Union. They've got the Smart Money checking account, which is awesome for those who want to make some of their smaller balances earn bigger returns. You can earn up to 6% APY on your first $2,000 each month. A month, that's $120 each year. That's my math for the day. So they've got some cool options there. So if you like earning money by doing things that you're really already doing with your money, visit westeracu.com/smartmoney for more details. Membership eligibility required, insured by NCUA. Restrictions and conditions apply. Also, got to share some love with our friends over at Toyota. They are the official vehicle of DNVR, of the Rockies, of pretty much every team. I think they're the official vehicle of every team. I might be wrong on that. I think they're the official vehicle of the Broncos, the Nuggets, the Avs, the Rockies, the DNVR fam. I mean, it's Toyota's, their arms stretch wide. And it's not just because they have a lot of money. It's because they're a really good car. I personally have a Toyota. I've only ever owned Toyotas. I had a Toyota Camry. I now have a Toyota Highlander. My next car is either going to be a Tacoma or a RAV4. My mom has a Toyota Tacoma. Like, I come from a long line of Toyota family, and I say it all the time. You go out into our DNVR parking lot, it's just all Toyotas, and that says something. Like, they are truly the best car in the market. They are affordable, they are efficient, they last forever. My God, my Toyota Highlander. It's a 250,000 mile Toyota Highlander, 2007. I was up in the mountains doing some leaf peeping, the other day, and my Toyota Highlander is just kicking it. I mean, it is crushing it at every turn. So if you want a truly reliable vehicle, you got to check out the Toyota. Visit your Front Range Toyota stores at a location near you. AutoNation Toyota, Arapahoe and Centennial, Corwin Toyota in Boulder, Groove Toyota in Littleton, Mountain States Toyota in Denver, Stevenson's Toyota East in Aurora, Stevenson's Toyota West in Lakewood. Toyota is the official vehicle of DNVR and of the Rockies. All right, I want to circle back here and talk about Ryan McMahon, because this continues our conversation of, is playing time guaranteed next year? And again, I think RyMac is in a different situation than Nolan Jones is because of his longevity and his all-star appearance and whatever. But RyMac has been struggling this second half of the year. He's had one of the worst second halves of a season out of any all-star that played in baseball this year. And that's so unfortunate, because he is such a good player and has such a good head on his shoulders. And, and I've talked to him a couple times in the locker room, and like, he's still RyMac. He's not down on himself. He's got a good head on his shoulders. So RyMac is going to be this veteran that plays for as long as he possibly can. But we did talk to Bud Black about what that's going to look like and how they adjust with RyMac. And I asked this question to Bud Black of what adjustments does he have to make going into this offseason, and what some of the conversations that they're going to have with RyMac. And so this is what Bud Black had to say about his adjustments that he needs to see RyMac make in this offseason.
We've had a lot of talks with Mac over the years, but he knows, Mac knows his second half numbers, right? All players know their numbers. With Mac, I think it's a combination of, his burden, I think, knowing his place on this team, and maybe putting a little bit too much pressure on himself to be that guy that hits third or fourth every day, and the responsibility that comes with that, and trying to do too much, as opposed to just letting the game come to him and be himself, right? Take his walks, get his swing off when he, when the pitch is there. But with Mac, I mean, it's I think he carries a lot of responsibility that I think works against him. So I mean, that's the messaging for us is you don't have to do this all by yourself.
That was a good response there from Bud Black. And I think he's right. He does carry a lot of responsibility. And look, it's the ups and downs of a season sometimes, too. You get your veterans that just get into slumps, and that's the way it goes. You got a long offseason ahead, and it's a new slate next year. Are you at all concerned about RyMac and his ability to kind of get back into it next year?
I'm not concerned. I am a little bit disappointed, because even coming into this year, it felt like, and Bud Black said this at the start of the year, he's always had more in the tank. We're looking to see that this year. And then when he finally got the All-Star nod, Bud referred to it back to himself, talking about that. I'm just disappointed, because it feels like for his entire career, McMahon, when hot, has been great for 2 months at a time. And that's exactly what you saw with April and May. And then even in June, before the All-Star nod, he really did slow down a bit, but then bounced back. It just feels like for every year since he became a Rocky in 2017, he's been a guy that can be consistent for 2 months and then is also inconsistent for the next 2 months. And so I was hoping that this was the year that, all right, like, this is the RyMac that we're going to get consistently from here on out. He did not really take that step. However, he got over the hump of becoming an all-star for the first time, and it feels like he's been close for 5 straight years. I also believe this is going to be the year he finally gets rewarded with that gold glove that he so rightfully deserves.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
And so that's encouraging. So, I mean, in terms of roster stability, he'll be a Rocky next year for the entire course of the season. It is interesting to go back to the trade deadline and think about, when the Rockies just outwardly said, we're not going to move McMahon, stop asking about it. Because now you look back and it's been a rough second half, to say the least.
Yeah, well, and also I do think from a positive side of not trading him, with Charlie Blackmon retiring, you need guys like RyMac who've been around the Rockies for a while and, can be in that clubhouse. I mean, really, it would have just been like Senzatella and Kyle Freeland if you had gotten rid of RyMac. So I do think it was the right call. And RyMac's an incredible player. I think Bud Black's point, they are probably going to limit him a little bit more next season just on playing time to give him more rest. Not from a you're not playing well, but from a we're going to balance it out so that you have more time to be on your best. And also to circle back to your point about, was this, coming into the season, is this going to be the year where he's consistent the whole year? Well, the Rockies didn't go anywhere this year. So even if he had the best year of his life, it wouldn't have mattered. So if he's going to have that all around, year where he hits 282, plus and has, a handful of home runs and is just all year long, next year is probably a better choice for that to happen. But yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see how they make those adjustments. And I think there's guys that are getting hot late in the season. Hunter Goodman, Aaron Schunk, Ezekiel Tovar, these guys are Brenton Doyle, these guys are stepping up in the second half. And there are guys that are slowing down, and that's where the Rockies need to be able to mesh. And it's unfortunate because, and we're going to talk about this here in just a second, some of the Major League Baseball other games and teams that are going on right now. But you look at the Diamondbacks, who had one of the best seasons in baseball. They were the best team in baseball. They were on a tear of just having one of the best starts to the second half of the season out of any team, and they still haven't clinched the playoff spot yet. That's where it's just so insane to me. It scares me because I look at what's the path forward for the Rockies to get to the postseason. I'm well, if the Diamondbacks had a 23-3 start to the second half of the year after already being in the top of the NL West as it is, and still haven't clinched a playoff spot, how the hell are the Rockies going to do that? Where are we going from here? So you need guys that are going to be consistent, and you need to have a rookie Nolan Jones year, a Ezekiel Tovar second half that spans all the way in the entire season. You need to have a Brenton Doyle second half type of numbers that span an entire season. You need Michael Toglia to have a better batting average and OPS, and you need your young bullpen and starters to be solid just for a chance at a wild card. That's the crazy thing about it. So let's talk a little bit about, what's going on around Major League Baseball right now, because it's chaos. I've said this my last two shows, man. It is the best time of year. I like this better than the postseason because you've got teams that are watching other games to see if they're, going to be moving forward. And it's just this whole thing. But can we talk about first the chaos that happened in Oakland and the Coliseum having their final game? Emma, can we pull up the video on Twitter of the line? This is from my buddy Kevin Coe. This was the line of people outside of the Coliseum before the game. They had 46,000 fans. It was a sellout. After having a team that basically was the last place in attendance, they averaged 11,000 fans all season long. What an emotional end of a 50-year era at the Coliseum, man. Did you feel at any bit emotional, seeing all the stuff coming out of Oakland and their final game there?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because you're watching all these fans get their team ripped away from them, and that whole area has just been decimated because the Warriors aren't even in Oakland anymore. The
Raiders.
Raiders are in Vegas, and you know
Yep.
I'm not going to show any sympathy for the Raiders, but I saw a sign, and it was an older guy. He had witnessed the first pitch in person when they moved to Oakland and
Yep.
became the Oakland Athletics, and then he was there yesterday to witness the last pitch. And you know, I saw people ripping seats out of the stadium. Good little souvenir to
Chaos.
have when you, yeah. But you feel awful for those fans because as challenging as it might get to root for a losing team, and Rockies fans are familiar with that, the Colorado Rockies aren't going anywhere. They know where their home is, and so
Yeah.
you can always count on that. I can't believe, to be honest, that it's hard to just wrap your mind around the concept of an owner is getting up and moving a team somewhere else simply because, you know, the fans haven't been there to support, but they haven't put out a winning product, and it just blows my mind. And it's really disappointing.
And also, did you see John Fisher's like statement that he put out a couple days ago? How
Email.
tone deaf that was, saying like, we did our best, we tried. Don't be mad at us. Like, what?
Yeah.
I mean, from a PR
it's-
nightmare, I'm like, I mean, Marissa, I mean, she got one of her degrees is in PR. She loves the PR side of things, and she doesn't know anything about, like, she's not as versed in what's going on over there. And I remember showing her that, and she was like, that's, like, who let him do that? Why would you allow him to do that? Like, what did you think? I mean, the entire world's going to blow you up on that.
You just it's frustrating for us, and I don't have any connection to the A's. You know, they're in the American League. They don't impact
Yeah.
the Rockies really at all. I'm frustrated for their fans because this is just messed up.
No, totally. I mean, I grew up in Seattle where we lost the Sonics, and granted, I was a kid, but we lost the Sonics, and I saw the effects of the fan base and what that did to the fan base. So I wouldn't wish that on anyone.
And for the team, next year they're going to go to a place where it's going to be like 115 degrees outside.
Sacramento
for
River
all
Cats,
their-
baby.
Oh man, it's going to be brutal.
I will say I am 100% going to make sure that I go to their first game at, I forget what it's called now. It used to be Rayleigh Field. I grew up going to games. So I grew up in, well, not really the Bay Area, but, you know, I mean, I was born in Petaluma, close-ish to Sacramento, a couple hours out. My grandparents are from Sacramento, still have a house in Sacramento. And so as a kid, I mean, I went to River Cats games all the time, back when they were the minor league team for the Oakland A's, and then they got moved to the San Francisco Giants. And so I just like loved going to that stadium. So when they play a game, God, I would love for them to play a game against the Rockies. I haven't checked the schedule to see if that's going to happen. But if they played a game against the Rockies, like, I'm going to be there. I will be there. It's going to be incredible. But for a fan base that has, you know, that can, as we just saw, show up for games, and we've seen in the postseason before for the A's, we've seen them show up before. They're a fan base that is there. It's like the Rockies. The only difference is Rockies fans still show up even when the team's losing because Coors Field is incredible and just super chill and a great way to spend your summer. Oakland fans, they exist, and they are diehard fans. So it's super hard to see, you know, them have to get moved to a minor league stadium for a year and not even have really a plan in place on where they're going to end up in Vegas when they get there. Like, are we going to be seeing games being played in Sacramento for 3 years? Like, what? It's not like you can build a stadium out of nothing in just like a few months. I have no idea what's going to happen out of that.
Well, yeah, stadium-wise, you're exactly right. I really hadn't even thought of that. I just think we've seen across other sports when teams move, I think owners and team and front offices assume like the fan support will be there. In the NFL, the Chargers basically never have a home game because their fan support is nothing. And it's also with the Rams. Every time the Rams play the Niners, the whole stadium's red. So it's going to be interesting to see a fan base that loved and adored their team, but the front office didn't really give them a reason to go to the games in Oakland. Now, is that magically going to get better when they're moving, however far away they are moving? I don't think so, and it's not been proven to be true.
I asked my buddy who's from Vegas. He just moved back. He actually just got a job there in Vegas at one of the TV stations, and I had asked him, I'm like, hey man, are you gonna become a Oakland, now Vegas A's fan? And he's like, no, dude, I'm a Rockies fan. Like I'm from Vegas. Like we're Rockies fans, or you choose your team. You don't, we don't have a team. So we like Vegas people already have chosen their teams. And so, like you're not like kind of switching over now just because you might go to some of those games, but again, you're going to root for your teams when they play that team. So yeah, I just don't, I get there's money there, but.
And it's different because when the Rockies were born, they put a baseball team in a massive abyss that had no teams. So, of course, the whole city and everyone within the state and surrounding states, it's like, oh, yeah, we finally have a team within 6 hours of driving. Like
Montana,
that's our
Wyoming.
Team.
Yeah, totally.
It's different in California when there's like 8 teams within, a couple hours. That's a bit of exaggeration, but what
Not really, though. Not really.
Yeah.
You're not too far off. It is. That's exactly how it feels. You could throw a rock and you feel like you'll hit, 50 different sports franchises in California. But look, we're running out of time, Noah. It's been a blast. I appreciate you jumping on to talk to me. We got a long offseason coming up, and when we speak next, it will be no longer Rockies baseball. It will be MLB postseason, which is exciting. I love the postseason, and it's going to be a blast. But I appreciate you jumping on to talk Rockies ball with me.
Yeah, thank you for having me on, man. I love doing this.
Well, stay safe out there in Indiana. I know the weather is a little iffy out there for you guys right now, so stay safe. We'll hear from you again soon. That's going to do it for us here on the show. You guys can follow me and our DNVR Rockies coverage at DNVR_Rockies. Also myself on Twitter at CJJ Saez. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We will see you guys on Monday. This has been the DNVR Rockies podcast brought to you by Bet365. We will see you guys next time.
We all silly like the mayor.